Cool. So welcome to A&P3, you guys. I'm Dave Holden. I'll be your instructor. Please feel free to speak up if you have any questions at any point. I know Zoom is a little weird. Sometimes the way my screen is, I don't see everybody's face at the same time. So if you just raise your hand and you're politely waiting, you may not even be on my screen. So just talk. I'll stop. What all do I have to talk about? First of all, please make sure that you guys check Moodle every week. I do not send out reminders for quizzes or assignments or anything like that. You have access to Moodle just like I do. So it is on you guys to pay attention every week and see what quizzes you need to take and things like that. What I will also say is if you spot a quiz and maybe the dates look a little weird to you, reach out to me and make sure, because when these courses get copied from term to term, sometimes quiz dates don't really translate over too well. So if you see a date and it just doesn't make sense, it probably needs to be fixed. So let me know and I can fix it. Let me think. I don't really think I have much else to say in terms of like housekeeping stuff. Just please make sure you keep up with Moodle and the quizzes and things that are going on. You all found the Zoom link on Moodle. I know some teachers were sending out a link every week. I just use the same link all the time. So we just use the same link. We all jump in and we all jump out. It's just much easier for everybody to keep track of. You can put the link in your calendar or something, like my iPhone. When the reminder comes up, I can literally push the button and my phone will just take me right into the meeting. So we are covering A&P3. So today we're going to start out with just a little general A&P review. So nothing really new, just kind of dipping our toe back in the water, kind of refreshing the stuff that we've learned previously. The major organ systems that we'll be covering this term, we're going to start out with nervous system. We will then move into endocrine, digestive, and reproductive systems. Nervous system is by far the more complex. That's going to take us the first half of the term. So your midterms are going to be your nervous system exam. And then the second half of the term is going to be all the other organ systems, right? Male, female reproductive system, digestive, endocrine. So again, I am fairly responsive to things. If you guys have a question or something, reach out to me on Moodle or send me an email. I tend to be more flexible with things like that. As long as you communicate with me, I'm much more apt to help you out with things. But if you wait until the last minute and then dump a bunch of stuff on me, I can't often help. So communicate with me early and often, and I will do whatever I can to help you out. You guys have been in my class before. You know how flexible I can be. So that being said.
I noticed on Moodle it had like questions. We were supposed to write questions.
Mm-hmm.
Was that due today for this
Yes, so I
class?
pose a question to get us thinking about the topic, or so that I can get feedback from you guys and kind of gauge how we're feeling. Because another thing that I'll say, you guys, and again, those of you who have been in my class, I frequently stop and say, any questions? Everybody good? We're all on board, right? Good stuff. When I say good stuff, you say good stuff. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Please, please, please. If you didn't catch what I just said, or it's not clicking with you, please speak up. It's really hard for me to go back and try to figure out where I lost you. And I honestly love teaching. I love answering questions. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm passionate about. I love answering questions. And if I explain it and it didn't quite make sense to you, I have like 4 other ways I can explain it. Like, this teaching and explaining is my superpower. So please, please, please don't hesitate to speak up if you're not following along. But today shouldn't be too hard. Like I said, we're just reviewing today. Just want to make sure that we're all kind of right at the same high water mark before we keep going on. So host, Dave Holden is the host now. All right. So First thing, we'll start out with the definition of anatomy and physiology. This again should have been like A&P1, day one. What are we even doing here? Anatomy is the science of the structure of an organ. What is it shaped like? What kind of tissue is it made of? When we talk about shape, we talk about morphology, right? The shape of an organ is its morphology. So how can you look at a bone and tell a humerus from a femur? You say, well, they're not shaped the same. What we would say is their morphology is different. The shape of an organ, the kinds of tissues that make it up. Physiology is all about the function. What does it do? What function does it perform? Anatomy will look at a lung and say, lungs are composed of this kind of tissue, and they are this large, and they are located here, and they are shaped like this. Physiology will talk about why the lungs are there, right? Processing air and exchanging blood and returning blood to the heart. And whenever we talk about anything, we always kind of group what we're talking about in one of those two categories, right? Do you guys remember when we talked about joints and we talked about structural classification versus functional classification? What material held the joint together versus how much movement did the joint allow, right? Its structure versus its function, its anatomy versus its physiology. And we don't normally contrast the two, right? It's not one versus the other. These two concepts are interwoven, right? When we look at biology, form follows function, right? The function arises. We evolve a form that allows that organ to better perform its function, right? So lungs aren't great lungs because they're so lung shaped. They are lung shaped because that shape makes them more efficient at their function. When we classify things, we have to understand the levels at which things are organized. So levels of organization, all life begins at the cell. There's nothing going on below the level of a cell that we can really talk about really being life. Cells can come together to form kind of like sheets of material. We call this tissue. Tissue comes in a few different categories, and each category of tissue, do I have any X-Men fans? Anybody like the X-Men, right? And what was cool about the X-Men was that they all had different powers, right? But they all came together to save the day. So you had like Cyclops with his eye beams, and you had like Colossus who could like turn into solid metal, and you had like, yeah, I don't know, I'm crossing universes here. I know, forgive me, comic book fans. But then you think of someone like Reed Richards, right? Mr. Fantastic, like the super stretchy man. When you think about tissues, they're kind of like superheroes. They each have their own unique ability, right? So when we think about muscle tissue, muscle's special power, like Reed Richards, is that they can stretch and contract, and then they can snap back to their original shape. That is pretty freaking unique. Contrast muscle tissue with bone tissue. Bone tissue is like Colossus, right? That like human living metal man. Bone tissue is very hard and rigid. It doesn't move, it doesn't contract, it doesn't bend. It was not supposed to bend. But because of the characteristics, makes it really good at protection, right? And creating joints to allow movement. Another type of tissue is nerve tissue. Now, again, nerve is not hard, mineral impregnated tissue like bone is, but nerve has its own special powers. Nerve cells can send signals along the length of the cell and connect that message to the next cell. In this way, we can create chains of cells that pass information along. That's kind of like Professor Xavier level stuff, right? We can send signals anywhere in the body, like from the brain. That's pretty freaking awesome. Connective tissues come in a variety of different types, right? So we have the webby, slithery, moving tissue like fascia, and then we have the harder, denser, not so moving tissue like ligaments. When you take two different superheroes, right, and you make a team out of them, two different types of tissues come together, right? They're on a mission to accomplish the same function. Two types of tissue combining to accomplish a definite function, you now have an organ. Stomach, brain, liver, spleen, kidney, gland, skin. Two different types of tissue. When you have multiple organs, right? Multiple superhero teams that all come together, right? Like Avengers Endgame style, you now have an organ system. The respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, skeletal, muscular, endocrine. Once you have all of those organ systems together, right, you now have the entire Marvel comic universe, the organism, the whole body overall. Good stuff? Good stuff. Now, every cell in the body has a basic minimum need requirement, right? Basic requirements that every cell has to have. We usually think about, I think it was like seven different things. The 7 needs of a cell are food, nutrients, water, waste removal, they need to reproduce, which is odd to think about as a need of a cell. But what you guys need to understand is when you get down into cell world, it is not this cushy little democracy that we're used to. It is like the harshest North Korean regime. Cells live in a strictly dictatorial society. You are born on schedule, you die on schedule, you are assigned your function. If you do not perform your function, you are summarily executed, right? If cells become non-functional, the immune system is supposed to go in there and destroy it, and they are replaced with a new healthy cell. So you don't get to be some like freeloading hippie going to like find yourself in the mountains. No, bro, you do your job or you get killed. So when it is time for you to reproduce and create a new worker, workers do not revolt. Workers create new workers on schedule, just like they're supposed to. Oh, they need homeostasis to be maintained. Oh, I'm stumped on the 7th one. Give me a sec. Food, water, waste removal, reproduction, homeostasis, and maybe it was 6. But homeostasis refers to this internal balance within the cell that has to be kept steady, right? We have to engage in metabolism type actions, right? Where we're taking in nutrients and breaking them down and replacing and repairing our own cell parts. And then any wastes that are produced have to be pushed out of the cell, right? To be taken on somewhere else. They need constant supply of nutrients. They need constant supply of water. They need a constant source of waste removal. They need to reproduce on schedule, right? In order for the body overall to remain healthy. And to do all of this, their internal conditions have to remain the same. Think about your body, right? Your body stays at a constant temperature, right? If you get hungry, or I'm sorry, if you run low on nutrients, you feel hungry. So you take in nutrients so that you don't feel hungry anymore. You are consciously maintaining your own homeostasis, right? If you're sitting in your house watching TV and you get a little chilly, you wrap a blanket around yourself, right? You maintain your body temperature. Cells have to do the exact same thing. Oh, thank you. That was the one. They have to maintain a constant temperature. There we go. So homeostasis refers to that state in which cells strive to maintain themselves. Now, the concept of homeostasis is easy enough to understand, but what I need you guys to understand is homeostasis is foundational to understanding what cells need. All diseases are ultimately cells not getting their needs met. Any disease you can think of, when you boil it down to its very most basic principles, some cell somewhere in the body is not getting one of those needs met. And therefore, the cell can no longer function. And the symptoms of the disease are the results of the non-functional cell failing to do its job, right? When one cog in the machine breaks down, the whole machine starts to break down. We see in our body, right, the overall effects, right, the symptoms and the signs of the disease, but the actual root cause of the disease is always going to be something cellular, right? Cells can't get blood, or cells can't get rid of their waste products, so their environment gets too toxic, or their temperature doesn't remain stable, right? That's what, like frostbite, right? The cells got too cold, or burns, the skin got too hot. Cool. All right, moving on. Planes of reference and directions. We are massage therapists. We are in an A&P3. My expectation is that these words are second nature to us by now. So if I say proximal or distal or anterior or caudal, none of us are stumped on this vocabulary, yeah? Awesome. Okay, body cavities. So we've covered the major cavities of the body, right? The abdominopelvic cavity, thoracic cavity, oral cavity, orbital cavities, cranial cavity, spinal cavity. Yes? Yes, okay, cool. All right. Atoms, ions, and molecules. So an atom is the smallest particle of matter that you can get that will retain the same chemical and physical properties of that material overall. So gold, for example, a gold atom is the smallest thing that will behave like gold will. Once you cut that atom any smaller, you don't have gold anymore. You have some other element, right? If an atom is generally going to be electrically neutral, but occasionally you will have atoms that have an overall charge, which will be attained through the gain or loss of electrons. So if we lose a bunch of electrons, we'll get an overall positive charge. If we gained a bunch of electrons, we will get an overall negative charge. And most of us are not super familiar with electricity. So if we just think about them more like magnets, it just kind of helps your brain make a little more sense of them, right? Positive and negative, it's like north and south. Like charges will attract each other, opposite charges will repel each other. And then once you have multiple atoms that are strung together, particularly varying atoms, right, like carbons and oxygens and hydrogens, they can bond together in very unique ways. Now, when we say bond, remember, think about a magnet, right? Some magnets want to join together, right? They do not have a brain, but if you leave them alone, they will tend to draw towards each other, right? We say want in quotes. Other magnets will repel each other. They want to be apart from each other. Using these kinds of principles, atoms will arrange themselves in very specific and very unique and complicated ways. These are molecules. So very common molecules we see are things like H2O, right? Two hydrogens will bond equally to one oxygen atom, and that is a molecule of water. CO2, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, CO, carbon oxygen. Now, specific molecules and those the compounds that they create, like water and carbon dioxide, many of those are vital for life, but some of them are toxic, right? They're produced as a byproduct of metabolism, and those have to be removed from the body. So one of my biggest pet peeves with massage therapists is the word toxins, right? We say, oh, massage flushes toxins from your body, or, you know, oh, I'm detoxing using this cleanse or whatever. Okay. First of all, the word toxins is a word that we use to be kind of polite when you are talking about the body and you're thinking about toxins in your body, right? Where do those toxins come from? Well, cells are living things just like you, and just like you, cells need nutrients, right? So when you get hungry, you go to Taco Bell. When cells get hungry, they pull nutrients from the bloodstream. They digest those nutrients like we do. They use those raw materials to replace and rebuild parts of themselves. But then what happens after Taco Bell, right? You got to go to the bathroom. Cells also produce byproducts, right? Waste products. Cells poop, and they poop into the bloodstream. And those waste products are the toxins, right? The cellular metabolic waste products. It's just cell poop. Your kidneys are super effective at filtering out that cell poop. That's mostly what urine is. As long as your kidneys and your liver are functioning normally, there is no need for detox diets that you're paying for really expensive pee. You guys, your liver is functioning, it detoxes your blood just fine. That's literally its job. So that was my rant about toxins. When we look at the things going on within the cell, collectively we call all of these processes together metabolism. Right? But metabolism is the whole cycle. And it's the same cycle you think of, when you think about eating something, right? So you get hungry and you go to the burger joint and you grab a burger. Well, when it's sitting there in front of you on the table, what good can the cheeseburger do to you in that form? The answer is not a lot. You've got a huge thing that I've got to now get into my body. So first I have to physically break it down into smaller pieces, like chewing. And then we have to chemically break it down further into smaller pieces, right? The basic building blocks. This first phase, taking something very large like a cheeseburger and breaking it down into smaller and smaller usable parts, is called catabolism. Catabolism is the breaking down of large molecules into smaller ones. So breaking down your macronutrients into their individual constituent parts, right? Proteins into amino acids, fats into fatty acids. Once you get those tiniest little bits and pieces, those your body can use, right? Those pieces are interchangeable. So if I have an old protein sitting here that's worn out, I can pull that old protein and plug in the new one, right? We can repair and rebuild our existing structures. Now what we're doing is building up these smaller molecules into larger and more complex things. This is the building up phase of metabolism called anabolism. So if you've ever heard of anabolic steroids, right? These are steroids that hijack cells in this phase, right? They hijack the building up phase to make them do it a lot faster and a lot more efficiently. So this is why those gym rat guys can get super crazy buff, right? When they're on steroids. Now they're not all on steroids, but when they are on steroids, they get super buff super fast because they've just hijacked the anabolic phase of metabolism. But what I want you guys to understand is it's not one phase or the other. Both phases are occurring simultaneously at all times in all of your cells, right? They are always constantly building up and breaking down. But overall, the rates balance each other out. So homeostasis is maintained. We are breaking down just as fast as we're building up. pH levels are another issue. pH levels are regarding acidity and alkalinity. So are we familiar with the pH scale? We've covered this before, right? 1 through 14, 7 is neutral, like water, right? 1 is more acidic, 14 is more alkaline, right? Common alkaline things are like bleach, common acidic things, well, acids, all acids. Right. Important organic compounds. So important compounds for life. We begin with what we call the macronutrients. The macronutrients are the things that you need in your diet in large quantities, right? We're talking about carbs, fats, and proteins. Carbohydrates are sugars and starches. So if you think about your food pyramid, that is everything at the very bottom and at the very tippy top of the food pyramid. At the bottom, you've got your breads, grains, rice, starch, cereals, pasta, things of that nature. And then at the very tippy top, you have your sugars, like sweets, cakes, candy, things like that. All carbohydrates are sugars, whether you're talking about the carbs in a potato or the carbs in a potato chip or the carbs in a piece of candy. The difference is whether these are simple carbohydrates, meaning the molecules themselves are very small, usually only 2 or 3 elements, or complex carbohydrates, which are going to be molecules that are very long chains of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The longer the chain molecule is, the longer the body takes to break it down. So complex carbohydrates take a while for your body to break down, right? Those are a good slow burn source of energy. Whereas the simple carbohydrates, it doesn't take much to break apart a molecule that's only 3 or 4 things, right? It's very quick release energy. Those would be things like sugars, like normal candies and things like that. Those will cause blood sugar spikes, which actually spike 3 times as your body processes all of that sugar. So all carbs are sugar, though. There is just simple sugar and more complex sugar. Fats can be broken down into fatty acids. And don't let the diet industry fool you. Fats are not only healthy for you, they are vital for you. There are bad fats, but just like sugars, right? There are good sugars and bad sugars. Fats are the same way. There are good, healthy fats, and there are bad, unhealthy fats. Good fats are vital in your nervous system. They insulate your nerve fibers to make sure that your nerve signals stay inside of the nerve. Fats also provide a ready, available, quick source of energy for almost every place in the body. Your body will tuck little fat reserves, right? You've got little fat pads stuck around your brain and around your heart and embedded within your muscles, right? That's what the marbling is in steaks and things like that. Your body has little bits of fat tucked away everywhere so that cells, no matter where you are, you've got a little bit of fat and it's somewhere nearby you if you need quick energy. The final are, whoa, I can't even spell. Proteins. Your body is made of proteins, right? When you think about your body itself, the muscle that is you, your bones, your hair, your skin, your organs, all of your cellular stuff is made of protein. So proteins, some of them can be manufactured within the body, others have to be obtained through the diet. Nucleic acids are the chemical data storage units that store the instructions for making proteins. That is like your DNA, like DNA, RNA, things of that nature. And then ATP is the energy currency of the cell. And the way I want you to think about it is this. Remember we said cells live in that harsh dictatorship, right? Where they don't have a lot of choice. Well, think about your life, right? If you go into your kitchen and you turn on your water faucet, water comes out because you paid the bill, right? You need money for water. You need money to get on the bus. You need money to put gas in your car. Anything you want to do in life is going to cost you money, right? Existence costs you money. For a cell, existence also costs them money. They have to pay to digest things. They have to pay to take certain materials across a cell membrane. And the money that they have to pay for these kinds of activities is paid in the currency of ATP. It's the energy currency. It costs a certain amount of energy for a cell to actively transport something across a membrane. It takes a certain amount of energy for a cell to reproduce itself or to digest material or to repair structures, right? So anything that a cell has to do, the cell has to pay a cost in terms of energy. And the currency that we use is the molecule ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Eukaryotic cells, if you guys don't really remember what is going on in a cell, for the finer points of what we're doing, you know, it is A&P1 stuff, right? For the finer points of that are not really A&P3 material. But remember what I'm telling you is all anatomy, all pathology, it all comes down to the cell. If you don't understand what's going on in the cell, then you're going to be lost when you're trying to understand why diseases have the symptoms that they do. If we can understand the machinery of a cell and what is happening inside of a cell, then suddenly the symptoms of a disease make a lot of sense, right? Think about cells like a little city, right? Or like its own little animal, right? You have a brain that controls everything, right? Or like a city hall, right? Where there's a boss, like a mayor, the dictator, that's the nucleus. He's got the DNA, he's got the instructions, he calls all the shots, he tells everybody what to do. You've got lysosomes that are responsible for doing the digesting stuff. You've got Golgi apparatus, which packages proteins for transport. That's like your post office. They package things. You don't leave town without a stamp, right? You don't get sent, you don't mail anything without a stamp. If something has to be packaged, it has to be packaged in the Golgi apparatus so that it can pass through the membrane and go on to do, cell stuff. Smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulums responsible for transport. They're like a highway system, right? Freeway versus neighborhood roads, transporting materials around within the cell itself. Ribosomes, produced by the nucleolus. Ribosomes are responsible for making protein. Since everything in town is made of bricks, made of protein, these are the guys that make bricks, right? All of the stuff, the endoplasmic reticulum, the membrane, all this stuff is made of proteins. So when we say ribosomes make protein, they make the freaking bricks that you're paving your roads with, right? It's the bricks that are building your buildings. All of the stuff in town is made of these proteins that the ribosomes make. So the cell membrane is the town wall, right? It differentiates what is inside of the cell from what is outside of the cell, right? We have specific gates along the town wall where you can come in or out, but it's a security checkpoint. Just anyone can't walk into town, right? You got to belong here, or you got to have a package that's being delivered to someone in this cell. Membrane transport, we have passive ways of getting across a membrane, things like diffusion or osmosis. And then we have active transport, which is going to cost you a little fee, but you can be taken directly across the membrane, right? Vesicular transport, transporting using vesicles, is another really fancy cell trick. I'm not sure it's super critical that we understand this exact method of transport, but it is cool to think about. Have you guys ever boiled, like when you're making pasta and you put the oil in the water, you notice how the oil makes all these little bubbles, right? And they don't mix with the water. You just, all these little oil bubbles. But if you just leave it alone long enough, those bubbles start to mix or merge together. And eventually you end up with just one large like pad of oil sitting on top of the water. You guys know what I'm talking about? So the way that these bits of oil create that liner between them and the water, it's the same way that cells do their thing. So if you can think about how these two random blobs of oil can bump into each other and then the membranes merge and then they become one larger blob of oil. That's how this kind of transport system works. So you've got some material, right, that's encased in a membrane. And as it comes close to the border, right, to the boundary, when the two bump into each other, they merge together. But when they merge, now the stuff is outside the membrane. So you've just transported something outside of a cell. Make sense? And we can do the same thing the other way. The material makes contact with the membrane. We start to, the technical term is invagination, right? The membrane folds in on itself to make like a little pouch. And then when the two lips of the pouch touch, the same little phenomenon happens. Those two little oil bubbles merge into one, and suddenly we've pinched off a little packet of material, and now we are inside of a cell. Cool stuff. Really, really cool stuff. Tissues, again, we talked about, these are different superheroes. Each kind of tissue has its own unique ability, its own special superpower, but it's only when these guys come together as a team that they can accomplish really magical stuff. Epithelial tissue comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, but my tip for epithelial tissue is epithelial tissue forms the skin of things. So think about going inside of your mouth, right? Like if you touched the inside of your cheek, you see how it feels like skin, but it's always wet? That is epithelial tissue. Not the same as like actual outside your body's skin. This kind of skin is different. It keeps itself moist, right? And it's way more exposed and sensitive than the skin on the outside of your body is, right? Epithelial tissue lines your body cavities. So anywhere that the body comes into contact with the quote outside. Now, we need to be sophisticated about this, guys. When we say outside the body, we're still talking about within the body. Think about inside your mouth, right? The skin inside your mouth is exposed to the outside world, even though you can close your mouth. That the space inside your mouth is still the outside. Down your throat, inside your stomach, that's still a contained bit of outside. Make sense? So epithelial tissue is the inner lining of your throat and the inner lining of your stomach and your intestines and your digestive tract. That is what epithelial tissue does. Epithelial tissue makes up the inner lining of your lungs, the inner lining of the reproductive organs, right? So like ladies, the inner lining of the vagina and the uterus, that's epithelial tissue, right? Anywhere where the body is exposed to the outside. Connective tissue, well, connects things. Ta-da! Blood, bone, tendon, ligament, fascia, right? All of these kinds of tissue that bind and hold stuff together. And we have various different types of connective tissue. My personal favorite, bone. Bone is my jam. It's my favorite organ system. It's my favorite thing in the body. Bones are just, they are so clutch. Bones are the coolest things ever. And I can't wait to like meet you guys in class and I can just really have the time to nerd out about how much I love bones. They are just the coolest things ever. Bone tissue is not like any other kind of tissue. It becomes impregnated with minerals, making it super duper hard and dense and rigid, which is super useful for its function, which is protection. So it protects delicate organs like the brain and the heart and the lungs. It protects vital areas of blood manufacture, right? So like inside the bones where your blood is being made, super delicate process, right? Super high security. You can't have any bad guys going on in there. So you put it literally inside of a bone fortress is where we make our blood. Bones are living organs though, just like your brain and your lungs. They grow and change over time. They develop at regular rates throughout life. They are not these like dry, dead, static things like you see on a classroom skeleton. They are living, vital organs, just like anything else. They break and they heal with little scars, right? When you've broken a bone, you can look at the bone and see where the scar is, where that bone healed itself. I mean, they are just flippin' amazing. Liquid connective tissue like blood and lymph, blood is made of red and white cells and platelets, and it's got super important jobs of carrying oxygen and nutrients and hormones and chemical signals all over the body, helps maintain your body's temperature, right? By distributing itself everywhere at the right temperature, we keep a consistent 98.6 degree body temperature. Connective tissue also includes cartilage, dense fibrocartilage, like what we see in the spine, ligaments, tendons. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. And then organ systems. So you guys have covered integumentary, skeletal, muscular in A&P1. And then you guys did circulatory, lymph, integ, and respiratory in A&P2. Cool. So what were your favorite organ systems? We will open it for discussion. When you guys all talk at once, I can't hear you.
I may be the one person in class who hasn't gone to AP2 yet.
Okay.
Just letting you know. But I do like respiratory system. That's cool.
Respiratory is cool.
I've always been a fan of the bones too. Skeletal.
That's my girl. That's my girl. Bones are dope.
Yes, they are.
So my bachelor's was actually in forensic anthropology. So if you've seen the show Bones, where she like looks at a skull and she's like, "Oh, this is an African female, 17 years old." That's what I went to school to learn how to do, and it is just as awesome as it sounds. It was amazing.
On the break, I started rewatching it. Bones.
It's a cool show.
It's a good show.
Not super like the science is accurate, but like the day-to-day of it is like, no, there is no like one lab where everything happened. That's not real life. But when she like looks at a skeleton and tells you things about, like, that is real. That stuff is true.
I really want to
So-
get deeper in the lymphatic. Okay, bye.
Lymphatic?
Yeah.
Lymphatic system is cool. Lymphatic, it's underrated, and I feel like a lot of people don't really appreciate the lymphatic system. But the lymphatic system is kind of a mix between the body's police force and garbage collector. Like they patrol the streets, like collecting garbage and stuff, but also like super high security detail. Like the lymphatic system is packed with white blood cells, like immune cells. Yeah, lymphatic system is cool. Lymphatic system is cool.
It's a game changer to have a healthy one.
Yes. Yeah, we underestimate the lymphatic system until something goes wrong with it, and you realize, holy cow, this system affects so many things. So if you guys have not already been acquainted with my anatomy app, this is the coolest anatomy app that I've found so far, and I use it all the time when I'm teaching anatomy or kinesiology or whatever. And one of the cool things about this is it gives you a lot of different models that you can look at. And since we're talking about the cell, let me see, where's my cell model? I'll pull up a nerve cell. So we're talking about nervous tissue. So here's a model of nervous tissue. And we can see a lot of different kinds of cells, right? And we identify them again based on their shape, right? So you look and you say, oh, those look like cells, but they all look a little different. That's because they're different types of cells. But when we really get into the nitty-gritty of it, they all have the same guts. You know what I mean? Just like people, right? Our skin looks different, our hairstyles look different, we wear different clothes, right? We have different jobs, but inside we're all the same, right? Heart, lungs, kidneys, spinal cord, we all got the same stuff. Cells are kind of the same way, they all look different and they all have different jobs and stuff like that. And some of them have special structures to allow them to do their job, but they all have the same basic structure inside. You've got a nucleus, and you've got Golgi apparatus, and you've got smooth and rough endoplasmic reticula to transport stuff everywhere. And they also have mitochondria. And mitochondria are, man, I could go on for an hour about these guys. They are just the weirdest little things. They don't even freaking belong here. We just like captured them. They don't even belong to us. They have their own DNA. They reproduce on their own schedule. They don't listen to the dictator. When the cell goes to divide, some of the mitochondria just go to the other side, but they reproduce all on their own. They've got their own schedule, their own thing. And their sole job in life, right? If you think about like the geese that laid the golden egg, these guys produce ATP in insane amounts. And they do it, they produce it as a waste product. So they just produce all this ATP that they can't really use. It's like they literally poop out ATP. And remember, your cells use ATP like money. So if you literally found like a dog that pooped gold turds, you would keep that dog alive and healthy and breed it and have all these like gold turd laying puppies. That's exactly what your cells did when they encountered mitochondria for the first time. They just like captured them and just kept them, and they just keep breeding. And you inherit your mitochondrial DNA directly from your mother. Sorry, fellas, but male lines are dead ends for passing on mitochondrial DNA. But because of this, we can trace your matrilineal ancestry using mitochondria from mother to mother to mother to mother, all unbroken all the way back. Mitochondria are dope. But They produce ATP in insane amounts. That is what they do. That is why they're beneficial. That is why we kept them around. So when we have, as we said, multiple types of tissue coming together to perform a specific function, we now have an organ. So when we're looking at different cells like this in the nervous tissue, we see all of these various types of nerve cells. And I'm just gonna, the details of them aren't really relevant for us today. I'm just pointing out a few different cells that we can see. We can see these guys here. We can see these guys. We've got another interesting little dude way up there. And then we've got these little octopus looking guys. All of these different types of nerve cells, different cells within the nervous tissue. These green blobs along the nerve fiber are made mostly of fat tissue. These insulate the nerve fibers to make sure that the nerve signal stays locked within the thing. Think about like electrical wires. You know what I mean? If you have a power cable or something, if the casing of the wire becomes frayed and the wires get exposed, if it's touching the ground, you could short circuit your device, you'll blow up your laptop, or the thing just doesn't get enough electricity, right? And the thing just doesn't function right. Nerve signals are kind of undergoing the same kind of process. They're being transmitted along a wire, and the wire needs to be insulated so that the signal stays inside. And if the insulation fails, then the signal becomes degraded. And by the time the signal reaches its destination, the full message may not be there. So this is the kind of thing that happens with certain kinds of paralysis, right? If the nerve is damaged, then the signal never reaches its destination at all. Muscles are slaves to the nervous system. They only do what they are told to do. So if the nerve never transmits the signal to contract, the muscle never contracts. And that's paralysis. We could also be looking at some kind of damage to the nerve, like say multiple sclerosis. This means the signal gets there, but the signal was degraded. So instead of a solid muscle contraction, we get a weak contraction or kind of a jerky movement where we start to lose control over our muscle contractions. So, and again, these structures are made of fats. So I'm just, again, illustrating this point again, that we have different types of tissue that are all working in harmony, right? Everything has to be working together for the overall health of the organism. So we've covered everything that's in the PowerPoint, I believe. Do we have any questions about anything that we have covered so far? This all should have generally been review. It shouldn't have been too much new material. All right, so no questions. All right. Olivia, I just got your email about the Moodle questions. Thank you. I will fix those dates for those questions. So let's look at Moodle for a moment, and we'll say the first week of class, get creative and create 3 test questions for the material covered. So, yeah, I need to fix the dates on this. We'll just do it in class and we'll call it done. How about that? I think fair is fair. We'll just do it in class and we'll call it done. So think about the kinds of things that we've covered so far. We're going to take a quick break. While we're on the break, I want you to be thinking about the kinds of questions that you would put on a test that have to do with the things that we've covered. So thinking about cells and tissue types, we're thinking about cellular functions, we're thinking about how organs are working, we're thinking about how they're all interrelated to each other. We're going to go on a 15-minute break. I just want you to spend that break just thinking about it, enjoy yourself, get some food or whatever you need to do. But when we come back, I want you to have at least 3 questions kind of in mind And we're going to kind of aggregate them together. And we're going to go through them together. Good stuff. Alrighty. I will put 15 minutes on the clock. You guys enjoy your break. I'll see you in 15.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hi. Dave, I do want to say that I'm super sorry I didn't see the questions like before today.
Okay,
But I did come up with some questions, so that's good.
good. So what I'm going to have everybody do is we're going to talk about them all together, but the questions that you've come up with, I would like for you to type them into the chat and submit them so everybody can read them. But we are going to kind of go over the questions that you guys have come up with. So one question should be true, false, fill in the blank, or multiple choice. One question should be a list, drawing, or drawing like ordering the process or something like that. The last question should be a short essay question that asks for the how, what, or requires some critical thinking. So you guys have had a few moments to kind of think about it, but something else that I want you guys to remember is, well, you know what? No, I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to see what you guys came up with. How about that?
Well,
Oh, I'm seeing some good questions. Madeline, I really like your question. Discuss the reasons for using medical terminology and directional references. Madeline, I like that question.
Thank you.
I did too.
What are the 7 needs of a cell? So Anita, I just want to say that isn't like you'll find that in some kind of textbook. That is just me being like, yeah, there's like 7 things I need. Because everything is going to boil into one of those like main category type things.
Gotcha.
Because you'll find textbooks that'll list like all the things, well, some of those, all these things that cells need, well, a chunk of those are nutrients. And like a chunk of that is about waste removal. And a chunk of that is about basic like metabolic processes and things like that. So it just, seven needs of a human organism. Ooh. Humans are so complex though. Humans have a lot of needs. Oh, that was like food, water, shelter. Unless we're pulling like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in which case.
Maybe just not add that whole question. Just take that out.
Good questions. Good question about the bone marrow. What do you guys think about bone marrow? What do you guys think about Reggie's question? Does bone marrow exist in everyone's body the duration of their life?
Yes, but it's two different kinds.
Clarify.
When you're a kid, it's yellow, I believe, and then when you're an adult, it's red.
I think those might be backwards, but she's got on the right path. I agree.
So you did get the two switched. So in kids, almost all of the marrow is red marrow. Red marrow is
Okay.
making blood. Once the kid grows up and reaches like adult height, and then the focus of the body's processes switch from growth and development to maintenance, right? We're done growing, we're done developing. We've developed. Now we maintain what we've developed. At that point, a lot of that red marrow converts into yellow marrow. Yellow marrow is yellow because it's full of fat. It doesn't function to do anything. Its function is to store fat. That's what it does, which is why bone marrow is so delicious, right? You guys ever had like well-cooked bone marrow as like a dish? Alfredo, yeah, Alfredo has. It's delicious when done right. And you think about why dogs, for example, like what is a dog's favorite thing is gnawing on a bone. Why? Because if you're a predator, right, and you hunt and kill animals and eat their meat, there is no higher source of calories than the super fatty bone marrow. It takes a little effort to like break the bone and get into it, but from a calorie standpoint, it is well worth the effort because that stuff has so many good fatty calories, which is good for a predator animal. In times of like emergency times, right? Like let's say your blood volume drops. Some of that yellow marrow can reconvert to red marrow and it will resume producing red blood cells, but only for a short time. Once the blood volume gets back to normal, it will convert back to yellow marrow and just go back to being delicious.
I was so confused because that reminded me of like vultures and how they basically just like eat bones and stuff like after the predators are done with it. And I was like, how can like an animal survive on just eating bones? Because I remember watching like Animal Planet forever ago, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
eating bones, like how can you survive? But now it's like there's actual proteins and meat like inside of the bones, and I don't know why, but it didn't click until just now, and I was like, wow, okay, like that is some of the most like nutrient filled types. That's why they're able to survive and have so much energy in order to just wait until the predator's done, because like they know that they're not just going to chew on the bones. That's their job. I was like, dang, wow, that's actually really cool. So
yeah, bones have not just a lot of mineral, but they have a lot of protein content to the bone themselves. And the other thing to keep in mind, though, when you're thinking about vultures and condors, is that their digestive system also evolved to be able to extract nutrients out of those kinds of things. So the things that we would find horrifically toxic if we tried to eat them, their digestive system is just made for that kind of stuff. So but yeah, nature is awesome. True or false, anatomy and physiology work together. Yes, two sides of the same coin. Form follows function. That's a question. What is pH? Whew. Now that's a good question. That's going to depend on how technical we want to get. Because if we're looking at our level as a massage therapist, what do we need to know? You know what I mean? Like acids and bases, you know what I'm saying? Is it more alkaline or is it more acidic? But if we are getting into the chemistry of it, do you guys know what makes acid acid? Yeah, yeah. So we'll stick, good question. So we'll stick to just the acid alkaline level of complexity on that one for sure. Yeah, acids, I want to say is hydrogen. They have, or they give off hydrogen or something like that. I am also not a chemistry major. I majored in bones. But acidic things, and alkaline things can both be used to like clean and things like that. But the reason that acids and alkaline things like bleach make such good cleansers is because most cells have evolved to stay somewhere near the neutral side. So if it becomes too acidic or too alkaline, one way or the other, the life just can't sustain itself. Acid ruptures membranes, or a good question about the pH, but that's a deep question. I like it.
That's why I said essay. You could add as much or a little as you need or feel.
Good stuff. So I guess since the theme of today is review, the next thing that I would ask would be, when you think back to the anatomy classes that you've had in the past, right? As we're preparing to go more deeply into the nervous system and a few other organ systems, I'm curious to know, how do you guys have any, is there anything that you guys are still unclear on? Is there anything that maybe you were able to pass the test, but you didn't really understand how the thing worked?
I feel like I've always been unsure on the cellular level of things. Like I'll pass the test, but it still hasn't like clicked a lot for me. Like even in high school, I was like, this is what, you know?
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up just like 13 like parts of a cell. And I also will recommend, and I'm pretty sure I put it in Moodle. I just want to verify, but I'm pretty sure I did. So in Moodle, I put on there the crash course link. If you guys haven't watched crash course videos, holy hell, it will make your life so much easier. He goes topic by topic, like organ system by organ system. So he's got a bit on the cell and things like that. He does talk pretty fast. So you may need to watch the video a couple of times to really catch everything. Or what I would recommend is you can change the YouTube playback speed. If you slow it down to 0.75, it usually slows it down enough, but he's only got so much time and he's got to pack a lot of information in there, but it's really richly animated, really well done. He does a very, very good job of illustrating the kinds of things that are going on inside the body. But when we were thinking about a cell, where's my notes? Here we go. Okay, so when we're thinking about a cell, there's a few main parts. And again, I want you to think of the cell as almost like its own little city. So the first thing we have is the cell membrane, right? That's the city wall. That tells you what is inside the cell from what is outside the cell. And just like a wall around your city, you got to have doors, right? People got to get out. Now, some doors will just be for like security guards. So you need small doors to allow small materials to be passed in and out. But, you know, your grocery stores have to be stocked and things like that. So you still have to have a large door so that massive like cargo trucks and things like that could come in. So you'll have specific points along the membrane's surface where materials can be transported in and out. Some things can go out almost anywhere, and certain things can only go out at very specific gates. Now, the one in charge of the city is the mayor. Now, this is not your little small town American democratic little city. This is a strict dictatorship. The mayor is the sole authority about everything that is going on inside of a cell. Since the nucleus is responsible for controlling all of the processes, right? Everything going on in the city, he's also responsible for the city's growth and development. So the paving of new roads and building new buildings, as well as maintaining the existing roads. And buildings and roads are all made of bricks. So the nucleus has a subcontractor. The subcontractor, remember, because they're all slaves, he lives in the basement of City Hall. The nucleolus is like inside the nucleus. The nucleolus produces ribosomes, and the ribosomes are like the little brick makers. The ribosomes are the guys that make the bricks. They synthesize protein. The nucleus holds the DNA, which is the instruction manual for how to build a protein and how to link the proteins together in the right way to build some specific structure, right? The instructions are written in chemical language, right? The chemicals of DNA, right? You guys are familiar from biology, A, C, T, G, right? The DNA alphabet. That is the instruction manual for how to make proteins, and then how to take those proteins and put them together to make, you know, a brain or a liver or a bone cell or whatever you need. The cell, just like us, has to take in food. And once we've got nutrients inside the cell, we have to do something to it, right? We have to digest it. Humans use a stomach. Cells use lysosomes. Lysosomes break down large molecules into smaller ones because they like so much to eat. The lysosomes like so much to eat. Oops. The endoplasmic reticulum, kind of like a hybrid between like your highway system, transportation and moving, but this organelle also manufactures stuff. So it's a weird combination. The endoplasmic reticulum comes in two types: the smooth and the rough. The rough ER is studded with ribosomes on its surface. Those ribosomes, again, those are the brick makers. They're making proteins. So the rough endoplasmic reticulum is used for the production and transport of proteins, whereas the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, think smooth like a slip and slide, it manufactures and transports lipids, which are the building blocks of fats. So fat molecules get to take the slip and slide smooth road, and the rough stuff, like the bricks and the rough and tumble rocks that we have to make and use to build the stuff, the proteins have to take the rough road. So manufacture and transportation of material, that's an endoplasmic reticulum thing. The cytoskeleton and the cytoskeletal filaments rather. Again, we're using the analogy of a city, but we are dealing in fact with a cell. When you think about animal cells, they're kind of like water balloons, right? They're three-dimensional and they're round. The cytoskeleton are filaments of proteins, usually like collagens, which are, you know, kind of dense and a little flexible, but the point of them is that you just kind of run them around inside the water balloon, and in general, they just help it hold its shape. They're just meant to help for structural support of the cell itself, like a skeleton does. What else do we have? Nucleus, nucleolus, nuclear membrane. Again, the wall around City Hall. The nuclear membrane distinguishes what is inside the nucleus from what is outside the nucleus. And only certain things get clearance to cross that nuclear membrane. You gotta have a high level security badge to make it through that door. Cytoplasm. Again, using the analogy of the cell as a city, the cytoplasm is the grass, the lawn. If you look at grass in a city, it connects everything, right? You can get on the grass and get almost anywhere. But again, the cell is like a water balloon with all of these organelles kind of floating in it. Cytoplasm is the liquid that all of the stuff is floating in. So if you want to use diffusion to transport something, you have to diffuse through a medium. You have to diffuse through something. Normally, when you think about diffusion, you think about like water, but there's a fluid inside of the cell, like a water balloon of the cell, and that is the cytoplasm. It's the liquid medium in which all of the stuff exists. It's the air that they're breathing in this town, right? The Golgi apparatus, as we said, is again kind of like the post office for when you need to send something out of the cell. So if you need to mail something, you know, from one house to another or to another state, you got to go to a post office. You got to put it in an envelope. It's got to be addressed correctly. You got to put a stamp on it, right? If I need to, let's say I as a cell, my job is to manufacture some hormone, right? Well, cool, boom, here, I made a hormone. Awesome. Now what do you do with it? Well, I got to get it out of the cell, right? But you can't just put something outside of a cell. It's got to be packaged and labeled so it knows where to go. So it goes to the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus will fit it with a protein membrane. So it's got a specific protein sequence. Now it's addressed and labeled. Now it can exit the cell membrane and go into the bloodstream and do its stuff. And when it encounters a cell that has the right receptor, now the membrane can be taken inside of that cell membrane. And now the hormone has been delivered to its destination, right? But you can't package it or transport it without it being packaged by the Golgi apparatus. It's like the post office, that's what it does. Mitochondria, again, they produce the energy currency of the cell. So in the city that is the cell, think about the mitochondria as this really weird mix between the city's energy plant and the banking system. It's like it's currency, but it's energy. You need energy to synthesize protein. You need energy to break down nutrients. You need energy to build those nutrients up into something new. You need energy to transport stuff across the membrane. You need energy to package that hormone in its protein membrane. All that stuff costs energy, right? Just like anything you do in life, mailing a letter, buying a bottle of water, anything you do in life costs you some amount of money. So that is what the mitochondria do. They are like somewhere between the energy plant and the bank. But again, it's like a strict dictatorial central bank. There's nowhere else you can go for energy except the mitochondria. They have a complete monopoly. It's a tough life. Vacuoles, storage units. When you have too much of something, you got to put it somewhere, right? So what a vacuole will do is if we have too much of something, we can use the same technology that we use for our cell membrane, that same kind of technology. We can just wrap it in a bubble of membrane. So now it's in its own little membrane, and we'll just let it float around the cell. And it's like a little storage unit where we can concentrate supplies of something, some chemical or whatnot, and then package it so that it stays together. And we can hold that vacuole within the cell, or we can package it and label it for transport outside of the cell. So I would say the vacuoles are like a storage unit. Oh, a storage pod. You know those storage pods they drop off in your driveway? Like that. We can make one, drop it off, fill it up with stuff, and then we can leave it here in the cell, in town, or I can ship it off to somewhere else. Good stuff. I like the cell. I like the stuff. So thanks for that question. I hope I covered everything. I just pulled up a random article on my browser that just listed the major parts of the cell, and I think I covered all of them. So
That was wonderful, actually. Thank you.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Anything else?
just to clarify, the nuclear membrane is the wall, so like the outside.
Yeah, the nuclear membrane is the wall around City Hall.
Gotcha.
So yeah, you're walking down the street and you see City Hall, but there's like a gate around it and barbed wire and it's electrified and there's guards and like they're checking IDs, bro.
Gotcha.
Yeah, nobody just walks into the nuclear membrane.
You gotta be a VIP.
Mm-hmm. Because remember, that's where the DNA is stored. And so DNA has to be, obviously it's got to be protected, but that's the blueprint. So you don't just get access to the DNA. The nucleus will photocopy the section of the blueprints that you need. So you don't ever get the full copy of the book. You only get a photocopy of the page or the chapter that you need to do whatever it is you need to do. Nobody gets the whole copy of DNA. That's what the RNA is for. They transcribe sections of the DNA for transport.
Got it. Okay, that helps.
Cool. All right, we talked about homeostasis. All right, planes of reference and directions. So what time is it? 3:03. Yeah, I still have like an hour and a half. So I'm just going to riff on planes and directions. All right, so the way I like to think about these imaginary planes is, since the human body is three-dimensional, it's usually easier to start off with 2 dimensions and work our analogy here, and then we can move up. So think about a map, right? When you look at a map, we put everything on a grid. You've got lines of latitude, or I always forget the 2. You've got longitude and latitude, right? The most famous line, did I switch them? I always switch them. It's latitude, right? This one?
Latitude is flat.
Ha! The tough one. Okay, so lines of latitude, lines of longitude. The most famous line of latitude that you know is the equator. Has anybody ever been to the equator? Have you seen it? Have you seen what's there? What's at the equator?
Nothing.
Nothing is an imaginary line,
Water.
right? So are these lines that we use to divide the body. But when you take the globe, right, and you cut it with the equator, it gives you 2 equal halves, but it also gives you 2 directions, right? This line gives you the directions of north and south, right? So when we look at the human body, we do the same kind of thing, right? So we can cut the body with an invisible line like this that gives you equal left and right halves. We call it the sagittal plane. Now, the sagittal plane also gives you 2 directions. We have the direction toward the midline, which is medial, and the direction which is away from the midline, which is lateral. So we would say the nose is medial to the ears are lateral to the nose. We can also cut the body in half this way. The horizontal plane, or the transverse plane, gives you an upper portion and a lower portion, and it also gives you superior and inferior. Now, the words superior and inferior are directional terms. They do not denote value. We're not saying one thing is better than another or worse than another. We are simply saying some object is either closer to the head or closer to the feet relative to some other object. Now that catches people. Relative to some other object. What do you mean? Well, think about an object on Earth, right? If I picked a place and I said, no, let's just say Austin, Texas. Is Austin, Texas south? Well, yeah, you're like, well, I mean, it's south of something, but it's north of other things, and it's east of something else. So no, you really can't just say something is south. It has to be south in relation to some other place, right? This is the same thing we do with superior and inferior. Nothing in the body is just superior or just medial. It's medial in relation to something else, right? It's a directional term. We can also take the body. This is my little person facing front. There's my little person. We can also take the body and cut it this way. Now we have a front half and a back half. This plane gives you two directions. We call it anterior or ventral and posterior or dorsal. Now, anterior, posterior are usually what we're talking about, right? We're usually talking about humans. Humans walk around on two legs. So when we stand up, we have a belly side and a back side. But if you think about, I'm not an artist, sorry, I didn't go to art school, but there's my dog, right? They have a dorsal side and a ventral side, right? That's why with sharks, there's a dorsal fin, right? It's not the name of the fin, it's the location of the fin. It's on the dorsal side, right? So when you pet your dog, right, you typically pet the dog on the dorsal side and you scratch the dog on his ventral side. When you pet the dog in a caudal direction from the head towards the tail. When you're brushing your dog, you brush in a cranial direction from the tail up to the head, right? You got to get that undercoat.
Can you write caudal on there somewhere, please? I just need the spelling of caudal. Thank you.
Did I?
See, I couldn't see it before. Sorry.
Caudal, C-A-U-D-A-L. The root caud means tail. It's Latin, it means tail. So caudal is in the direction of the tail. And then cranial, toward the direction of the cranium. But again, you're looking at the dog from head to tail, right? We're talking about movement from head to tail, right? Cranial or caudal. If that dog were to stand up on his two legs, now we say superior, inferior. Make sense? So superior, inferior, we can also say cranial or caudal. Welcome to anatomy. Everything has 5 different names. You have to die mad about it. Welcome to the world. Every single flippin' thing in this subject has like 12 different names, but that's just the way it is.
So do we ever refer to caudal to humans? Like
You
when
will
they're
sometimes,
laying down? Okay.
Yep, you will sometimes. But typically, we say superior, inferior, and we say anterior, posterior. But if you see cranial or caudal, you need to understand we're just talking about the direction. If you see ventral or dorsal, we're talking about belly side or backside. We're still talking about anterior or posterior. Now, another concept that some students get tripped up with is that once we have this concept, right, of these imaginary planes, movements happen within these planes. And the best way that I can explain it to you guys, and it's a little morbid, forgive me, but just follow along with me, okay? We are doing a magical experiment, right? I cannot be harmed, I am immortal, nothing can happen to me. But as I am standing before you teaching, a huge pane of glass drops straight down and slices me in half, right down the middle, giving me a front half and a back half. Okay?
This analogy, but I hear you.
How do I have to move my body in order to leave a bloody smear on the glass? Right? So now that I've been cut into a front half and a back half, right? Cut through the frontal plane, to leave a bloody snow angel, I would have to AB and adduct my arms, right? Like jumping jacks. Abduction and adduction occur in the frontal plane. So remember, I'm magic, I can't be hurt. So we pull this glass out, boom, I'm back to normal, no big deal. Now, a new piece of glass drops down on me and cuts me this way. Now I'm cut into left and right halves. Now, how do I have to move to leave a bloody smear on the glass? flexion, extension, right? Flexion and extension occur in the sagittal plane. Now we pull that piece of glass out and I'm back to normal, cool, right? I'm not hurt. And a new piece of glass cuts me this way, horizontally. Rotational movements occur in the horizontal plane. Things like pronation, supination, things like rotation of the neck, things of that nature. So if you ever catch one of those questions and they're like, because you'll catch one that'll be like, what movement does flexion, or what plane does flexion occur in? Flexion extension is in the sagittal plane. Just, I know it's a weird thing to keep in your brain, but you got to think about like, how do I have to cut to make a bloody snow angel? That's how you think about the plane and the movement that it's occurring in. Yeah.
Question. What is the plane called that divides anterior and posterior again?
Frontal plane
Thank you.
or coronal plane. Corona is Latin for crown. So again, if you imagine someone has been cut in the frontal plane, you would see that plane right over their head like a crown.
Thank you.
Yeah, frontal or coronal plane.
I always think of coronal after the solar eclipse, as the corona is around the outer part of the sun. So that's
Yeah, there you go. And then when we talk about sagittal, so remember, just like the equator, right? The equator is just the one special one right in the middle, right? There's another line of latitude above it, and there's another one right below it, right? The only thing that's special about the equator is it's just the one in the middle, right? This particular sagittal plane is the mid-sagittal plane that gives you equal halves, but we could theoretically drop this plane anywhere, right? So you can imagine I could draw a sagittal plane that's like off to the side. So both my eyes are on one side and my one ear is stuck on the other side by itself, right? It doesn't have to be equal halves. That would just be any sagittal plane, just a sagittal plane. The mid-sagittal is the special one that gives you equal halves, like the equator. It's just the special one right in the middle. Now these come into play, especially if you guys ever have to go to the doctor and let's say you get like MRI images taken, right? So there are a lot of different ways that we can get images done. I'll do... So what an MRI will do is it will take images in slices, but those slices are oriented along the anatomical planes. So we can get MRIs in the sagittal plane, or we could take MRIs in the coronal or the frontal plane. Make sense? So are we getting slices of the brain, you know, kind of going back towards the occipital lobe, or are we getting them even in the transverse plane? You start with the top slice and you work your way down like a hamburger, assembling the brain together like that. And so depending on where the problem is or what structure you're trying to image, different image orientations, right? Whether you're taking those photos in the sagittal, the frontal, or the horizontal plane, certain things will show up better when viewed along certain parameters like this. Now, we obviously don't do any imaging as massage therapists. My point here is just to illustrate one of the reasons why this is important, right? Why this is, in medicine, these planes, just they don't go away. You always have to know what this stuff is. All right, so we talked about movements, we talked about cells, we talked about planes, directions. I feel like we covered tissues pretty well. All right. So the last thing we'll recap, and I know it's a little early, but we'll wrap this up and then we'll see if anyone has any questions and then we can call it for the afternoon. I don't feel too bad since everything, we were just doing a review today, guys. It's not like we covered anything new, so I don't really feel so bad. But Let's do just a kind of quick run through of the organ systems, basic idea from all of the different organ systems. First and foremost, skeletal system, right? If I'm talking about organs, I'm going to talk about bones first. They're the coolest. They provide, as you can see, a framework for what the rest of the body will look like, right? They provide a repository for minerals, so we can store extra calcium, magnesium, sodium, anything like that. We can store it in the bone matrix, and then if we start running low or something, just like a savings account, if you need some extra calcium, we can just pull calcium out of the bone. No big deal. Bones also produce all of your blood, and they also serve as an important location for white blood cell development. So when white blood cells, which are immune cells, right? So they're like the police officers of your body. There are two major police academies in the body. There are two main places they go to school to learn how to do their jobs. That is the bone marrow and the thymus. So if you've taken immune system, you guys remember B cells and T cells? That's what that means. It tells you where the cell went to school. It either went to school in the bone marrow or it went to school in the thymus, and it became a B cell or a T cell. Now, we also have an incredibly intricate network of connective tissue. This would be tendons and ligaments to fascia to those kinds of cells that just spread and just support everything and just give like a matrix for all the other stuff to kind of hang on to. Fascia is criminally underestimated in massage, I feel. Part of the reason is most of what we learn about the body and anatomy is through dissection. And by definition, dissection is done on a dead body. Fascia is such a unique kind of tissue that you really don't get to see what is going on with the tissue once it dies. Cadavers that we dissect have also already been embalmed. So they've already flushed formaldehyde through the tissues and everything. And formaldehyde is a preservative because it denatures proteins. Think about scrambling an egg, right? When you put that liquidy egg in a hot pan and it solidifies, the heat has denatured all of the protein. When you embalm a body with formaldehyde, the proteins are denatured in a way that it preserves. But that's the thing. Fascia doesn't preserve like that. And you don't get to see anything special about it. It wasn't until very, very recently with laparoscopic procedures, laparoscopy being, they'll make a very small incision and they take a camera and they slide it in. So in vivo, like in living tissue, we can stick a camera in there and watch as we manipulate the fascia and twist it around and see how the tissue moves. This has only been in the last few decades that we've been able to do this and really start to understand there is so much more going on in fascia than we were giving it credit for. Now, you can't really talk about the fascial system without talking about the muscular system. So the muscular system is the system of generally skeletal muscles. Muscles connect two bones together. They cross joints, and by contracting their elongated fibers, they apply a force onto the bone. And here is a key thing. The force that they apply is always a pull. They only pull, they never push. Another major important organ would be the heart. Heart is a muscular cone-shaped organ. It's responsible for pumping the blood. It's a pump. It has one job. It does it really well. Thank you very much. The heart is a rather complicated pump. There's a lot more to it than you can see. You see it here in its pericardial sac. So when you just cut into the body and open up the chest and take a look at someone's heart, it really doesn't look all that fancy because it's wrapped in a layer of dense fascia. It's got a nice dense sac around it. So if we just hide that sac, there's a second sac. So we got to hide the second sac. And then we can see the heart. But wait, there's a third sac. Yes, that's right. There's a third sac. So we've got to remove that. And now we can see the naked heart. Remember how we said the body likes to tuck fat a lot of different places? Well, if we look around the heart, you see all that yellow tissue. Oops. Whoa, sorry. You see all that kind of yellowish tissue around the edges? Your heart stores a little bit of fat. It's totally normal. It's perfectly healthy, but it will store a little bit of fat around the heart inside the sac, just to make sure that those cells always have energy available if they need it. Through a complicated system of arteries and veins, the heart will pump blood to every square millimeter of your body. All of your tissues get infused with blood. Not only does the blood bring oxygen and nutrients, it also serves as waste removal. So your cell poop diffuses into the bloodstream to be taken on, live its best blood life. Now, when we talk about the cardiovascular system, you really don't want to go far until you talk about the lymphatic system. Because what a lot of people fail to understand is, just like with blood, you've got a liquid tissue that is flowing through vessels. With lymphatics, you also have a fluid that is flowing through a tube, right? Just like blood. The big difference is blood is under pressure and it's being pumped by the heart, right? Over and over and over again. The lymphatic tissue, man, it takes its time. It is not in any kind of hurry. The other main difference is the fluid doesn't always stay inside the vessel like it does with blood. Lymphatic fluid starts out in the tissue as interstitial fluid. Once the interstitial fluid is taken into a lymphatic vessel, now we call it lymph. Once you are in a lymphatic vessel, you will be taken along from lymph node to lymph node to lymph node. Now, the way I want you to think about these lymph nodes, think about police stations or like the security line at the airport, right? As all the lymph flows into this node, it is packed to the brim with white blood cells, police officers. If you do not belong in this body, you don't survive very long inside of a lymph node. Let me just tell you that. And if you maybe by chance make it past the lymph node, there are like 94 dozen others you have to pass before you reach your ultimate destination. No one who doesn't belong really survives very long in the lymphatic system. But if you belong, right, and you're healthy and you check out, then you just get passed from vessel to vessel, right? And you guys remember the movie Finding Nemo when they were stuck in the aquarium at the dentist's office, right? And all they wanted to do was get flushed down the drain because all drains lead to the ocean. In the lymphatic system, all vessels lead to the heart. All of your lymphatic vessels converge together and form a lymphatic trunk right there, plugs into the left, the left and the right subclavian veins right behind your clavicles. And once there, all of the lymph that's in the tube gets dumped into a vein. And so we change the name again. We don't call it lymph anymore. We go back to calling it blood plasma. Same stuff. Interstitial fluid, lymph, blood plasma. It's the same fluid. It's the circle of life, y'all.
Quick question. And then it goes through the liver to get filtered and like pulled out of all the toxins, or is that done in the actual lymph system?
So the lymph nodes, those white blood cells will consume, like literally eat anything that doesn't belong. Waste products usually get sent to the bloodstream. And yeah, there the liver will and the kidneys will detox the blood. But the lymph nodes are usually responsible for detoxing the lymph itself. Another important organ system is the nervous system. Now, this is the real heavy duty guy, man. This is the one that we still don't fully understand how the hell the brain works. I feel very confident when I say the human brain is the most complicated object in the known universe. Compared to things like stars, stars are relatively simple. Stars are basic chemistry and physics in action. We totally understand how stars work and what they're doing and what's going on inside of them. They're really not that mysterious once you know a little bit about chemistry and physics. Despite all of our research and study on biology and brain development and all that stuff, there's still way more that we don't know about the human brain than what we do know. We do know, we've mapped all of the different physical parts of the brain. So physically, we know what's going on inside and out. Functionally, like what is it doing? We can localize certain functions. So we can point to certain areas and say speech happens here, image recognition happens here, figuring out how to coordinate your muscles to speak, or developing a long-term plan, your personality, the feeling of hunger, feeling horny. All of these functions, we can point to certain areas in the brain and say, this is where it happens. We're still not totally 100% down on how all of that happens. We know a lot about it, don't get me wrong, but the brain is flippin' complicated. So it's like the more we learn about it, that answer creates 5 more questions. It's fascinating stuff, don't get me wrong. But as massage therapists, we do not need to worry about what the cutting edge neurologists are doing. I'm sure they're doing it very well, thank you very much. What we need to understand is the basic structure. What's the system shaped like? What's it doing? How is it organized? And then the very basics of how does it actually do its job? How do we send signals? How do those signals have an effect in the body? The respiratory system, as we said, lungs, bronchioles, the trachea. This system is all about processing air. And somebody had said respiratory was your favorite. I'll show you this. Where's that? Bronchial tree. It's a little slow, sorry. But it's coming. I think it's coming. There we go. So when you breathe air in, right, if we were going to be like Magic School Bus style and we just get breathed in our little Magic School Bus into somebody's lung, what it would look like from the bus's perspective is being blown down a tube, and every so often the tube just divides into 2 branches, and it's random which one you go down, but your branches it keeps branching and branching, and it gets smaller and it gets smaller and it gets smaller, and it branches again, branches and branches, and at some point the tiniest little branch ends inside a little cluster like this. This is made of single layer squamous epithelial tissue. So these cells are a single layer, and the cells are shaped like flat discs, like a pancake. So it's very easy for material to diffuse right through that cell because it's very thin. There's a wafer-like. As you see, all of these little chambers have holes, so they connect to all the others, so that as you breathe air in, the entire cluster fills up with air. And then when you breathe out, the whole cluster can contract. Now, I want to make a point. There's no muscle in here. It doesn't contract by itself. It is pulled by muscles, right? So lungs don't lung all on their own. We need muscle to move stuff around in order for the lungs to do their thing, right? Lungs don't just open themselves up. We can also see on the outside of those alveoli that delicate network of blood vessels. So we bring blue blood into close contact with just a thin membrane, right? The concentration gradient is set up. We've got a lot of waste on one side and a lot of oxygen on the other. When you set up a gradient like that, nature takes its course, right? Nature hates gradients. We will create diffusion to spread those across the membrane. So now waste diffuses into the lung, oxygen diffuses into the bloodstream. Now we have blood that is packed full of oxygen. We ship that back to the heart. And now we have an air sac that's full of carbon dioxide. So we breathe it out. And that little exchange happens about 14 trillion times a minute from all the alveoli in your lungs. It's a lot of exchange happening. Lungs are awesome. Digestive system, the really, really long tube of outside. You're a donut. Congratulations. From here, we take material from the outside, food and water, and we bring it inside of our body, but we still keep a little pocket of the outside, right? Just in here. We expose it to mechanical digestion and acids and bile and all kinds of really noxious chemicals to break it down. We absorb those nutrients into our bloodstream. So now they are officially in the body. Anything that cannot be absorbed will be saved for our bacterial friends who live in our guts. They are also like the goose that laid the golden egg. They produce certain vitamins as waste product that we need for life and we cannot make ourselves, like vitamin K. So we save a little bit of food for our bacterial friends in the large intestine. We give them free room and board. They poop out vitamin K. We use that vitamin K to clot our blood, amongst a lot of other things. Whatever is left over then has to be excreted, because that waste product that could not be taken in. The last stop before we leave, though, is the large intestine. The large intestine's whole function is all about water balance. We extract every last usable ounce of water before we dump it. The whole process of growth and development is regulated by a diffuse system of organs. So you don't see a system that's really spread out quite like this one. But the endocrine system is comprised of various glands, which produce chemical signals called hormones. And those hormones go on to have profound and substantial effects on human growth and development, puberty, sexuality, the fight or flight response, the feeling of being hungry, waking and sleep cycles. Critical system. And last but not least, the integumentary system, right? The city wall, the boundary, the cell membrane of your body that determines what is inside of the body from what is outside of the body. One of the most basic and primordial immune functions that we have is a physical wall, right? I mean, sometimes walls work, right? Great Wall of China. I know the Great Wall of China didn't really help, but the skin doesn't always work. But it is nice to have a physical barrier that differentiates what is inside of the body from what is outside of the body. At least you have a better chance of avoiding an infection. Now, sometimes you get cuts or scrapes, or some things find their way into the body through other ways of getting into the body. But at the end of the day, you would still rather have a physical barrier than not have a physical barrier. The skin is the largest organ of the body. And that's a point that I usually just like to differentiate. Skin is the largest organ of the body. Skin is the largest organ that you have. An average sized adult male, the skin would be about 19 square feet. That's a large rug. The liver is the largest organ you have in your body. It is the largest internal organ, but it is not the largest organ of the body. Minor difference, but it's worth clarifying. It's worth clarifying. And the liver is quite large. We add our liver in here. Notice it goes from the right side of the rib cage, cross the midline about halfway through the left side of the rib cage. So like, if you were to just draw a line like across, like 60% of that line is liver. But it's a big freaking organ, man. It's big. All right, good stuff. Questions about anything that we've covered, anything you're curious about? Yes. Anita.
So I did see in the syllabus, I'm just like clarifying, make sure I don't show up somewhere or don't not show up somewhere when I need to be. We do not have class on Monday.
For 4th of July?
Yeah.
What I think is just gonna happen is we will not have class on the 4th of July. The following week, which would be week 3, is gonna be week 2. And we'll just pick up from there.
Okay. I just was clarifying, not that I don't like the class.
Yeah, no, I get it. But no, we're not doing holidays. No, we'll just take the week out and just everything just shifts one more week.
That's fine.
So does that mean the 10-week course extends 1 week?
Yeah, just so the Monday that would be our last class is now going to be week 9. Then the next Monday is week 10, and that's the last day of class.
Okay, just childcare has to be thought of well ahead, so I need to make sure I know to add a week.
I totally get it. I totally get it. It's a freaking mortgage payment to keep those kids looked after.
Oh my God, it is.
It's
right
insane.
here, I don't know if you can see, or I guess you could put it on Moodle. If you look on the syllabus,
Yeah,
I just printed it out, and then
I didn't write that. So they write that for me. So does it say? I can't
Sorry.
read it. I can't read that, Anita. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It
so
says there's
pull up
11 weeks.
Pull up Moodle. Dave, please.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Because that's where I got this. I just wanted to make sure it was right versus making plans. Yeah, that.
Yeah. So if you look at the calendar and you count out 10 weeks, 10 weeks is August 30th. So this one's actually going to be 11 weeks because we missed the 4th of July. So we're just adding one more week on the end of it.
And to confirm, the last one is actually on a Tuesday, not a Monday, because it's another Monday holiday, according to that syllabus.
Oh, see? Weird.
The last thing, so this says evaluation. There is no, it's a final exam, which is on Moodle. So we don't have to have a last class day. I can just open it up for the week. You know what I'm saying? And then so like the 10th day would be the Labor Day would be the day that like your final is due on that day, but it will be open for like a week ahead of time. So that whole week beforehand. So if it's turned in and submitted on that last day, then there is no class. You have nothing else to do.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for asking. Yeah. Good stuff.
I just like to know ahead of time. I don't want to do everything backwards or something like that.
All right. Well, so next week we are going to officially begin the nervous system. Buckle up. It's a tough one. Coming to class next week. Let's see. Let me pull up Moodle again. Nope. So no class next week. It's a holiday. Right? It is a holiday. So then following week. Look over the slides. I'm not asking you to like learn this. I'm just saying familiarize yourself, right? So I don't want you to hear the word oligodendrocyte for the first time when I say it. I want you to have read it and have a basic idea of what's going on. Basic idea of what's going on. I would also say crash course. Start watching those crash course videos. Again, he doesn't follow the format that I follow, but having a better idea of the system overall just helps put the things that we're talking about in better context. It's just nice to have the background info. It makes my job a lot easier. The other thing is, what mind quieting technique do you want to use for the next few weeks? We're talking about the nervous system, right? Nervous system is all about fight or flight, right? Stimulation versus calming. You study better and you learn better when your mind is quiet and focused. So I want you to look into a few ways of quieting your mind. This could be breathing exercises, this could be visualization exercises, this could be candle meditation, whatever. I'm not looking for a novel. When I ask those questions, I am not looking for a novel. A paragraph is a lot. Just have those ready. And this has been AP3. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey,
Thanks,
Dave, can I
Dave.
also talk to you after everyone gets out of the meeting?
Of course.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you,
Did
Dave.
anyone else have any questions? Anything?
Thank you.
If not, you guys are free to go. If not, you guys are free to go. Have a good one.
Have a
Thanks,
good holiday.
Dave.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Alfredo. All right.